Sorry it's been a while since I spoke about kickboxing, guys. I went into protest saying that I would only start talking about it when Tyson Fury actually fights a rightful contender. But then I realized I don't want to quit making these videos, so here we are.
You got your rematch and didn't even want to fight at that. You little... Always know that you was never man enough to tangle with the Gypsy King.
The year is 2009. Michael Jackson just passed away and Barack Obama was inaugurated as president. In Japan, the darling fighter of K1, Masato the Silver Fox, just won his final match against the legendary Andy Souwer before announcing his retirement from his prestigious career in kickboxing. Masato was a defining character in Japanese kickboxing, and for many, represented their country's presence in the sport. Few rise to a level where their face begins to represent the company they fight for and the country they come from. There are outliers like Conor McGregor and Rodtang.
The Declaration of Independence, for me, is one of the best pieces of writing I've ever seen.
It's a revolutionary document for a revolutionary statement.
You cannot help but be stirred when you read those words.
But there is no clear roadmap to get there. Some people just have the it factor and others don't. Regardless, with the honourable and skilled Masato having his foot out the door, it was time for K1 to find a new homeward sweetheart that the eyes of Japan could transfix on. Enter the sister organisation, Crush. As stated, Crush is an underling to the legendary K1 kickboxing organisation. For the most part, Crush's key function is to discover new talent within its ranks that would be suitable for K1. It's basically like a more violent K-pop training school. After a notable amateur career and the beginnings of a promising professional career, Takeru, a young delinquent Japanese kid with a chip on his shoulder and perfect salon-quality hair, arrived at Crush. Takeru is probably one of the most unassuming fighters you've ever seen. When you look at him, you don't think much, especially in the Crush days. He was just some poor Japanese kid who trained to one day fight in K1. There were thousands like him, and there'll be thousands more like him, one would think. Just another face in the crowd. Nobody really noticed him at first, but then he knocked someone out. Then another one. Then another guy. Then another 5. Okay, Takeru's now a champion at Crush, winning a tournament where he had to fight 3 times in one night. Collectively, more and more heads were beginning to turn so they could watch Takeru. Why? Because he knew how to scrap. Not fight, scrap. The only time Takeru lost throughout his 9-1 4-year career in Crush was due to a TKO doctor stoppage caused by Takeru trying to take the other guy's head off with reckless abandon, not noticing he had a nosebleed the entire time. Yes, Japanese referees are that squeamish. A Around this time, he wasn't so much a skillful fighter as he was a battering ram that annihilated anything put between him and his dream of being in K1. He was one of the most charismatic and exciting fighters Crush had ever seen, which got higher-ups thinking, if this kid can rule over Crush, would he be able to take the unattended torch of the aptly titled Charisma of Max, Masato the Silver Fox?
新生 K1 として始まってからどんどんカリスマ度が増してますよ。タケル選手が出てくると試合会場が急にうわーってねテンション上がるんですよ。
Like I've said, Takeru at this point was basically the face of Crush and everyone loved him. He was one of the reasons so many people tuned in to watch the smaller league organization. He came from nothing and was able to beat people down left and right. As a mercy to Crush's future talent, it was only right to take him into the big leagues where his abilities seemed to belong. Takeru was finally able to enter the big leagues of K1 and everyone was waiting with bated breath to see if his talent would translate into this far more stacked organisation. His first taste of K1 was a championship tournament where he had to fight 3 times in one night again. He obliged and finished 2 of his opponents before winning the final bout via unanimous decision against a former foe, Tiger, who he beat during his Crush title reign. Following the end of this tournament, Takeru was crowned the new bantamweight champion. With his first ever exposure to K1 being a super bantamweight championship tournament that he won, he was already proving that K1 was right to take a chance on him. Takeru being a champion was all part of a company plan being held together by his staggering talent and annoyingly granite chin.
Dude, why is it that when I flash somebody, it's like I just slapped them in the face with a fucking napkin from a little kid's birthday party? But when I get fucking flashed, it's like some big brawling blaster named fucking McQueen pulled a fucking bedsheet over the head of my head and just proceeds to skull fuck me!
The same year that Takeru joined K1 was the same year he became the Super Bantamweight champion of kickboxing. After 2 more fights in K1, where he defended his belt against 2 very worthy challengers, one being Kaito Ozawa that we will see again, he would go on to relinquish his belt at that weight class. Why? So he could go and make his way through the featherweight division. To do this, he had to enter another K1 championship tournament for featherweights, where one of his most recent adversaries I mentioned, Kaito Ozawa, followed, where they proceeded to have one of the most awkward press conference scuffles I have ever seen in my life.
Get him up, let him get up, let him get up, let him get up. Fight back, nigga! Fight back, nigga!
Seriously, like, without a roaring crowd, it just kind of helps you realize it's basically like a playground scrap. I'm like 90% sure that this confrontation was pre-planned anyway, to be honest. I Google translated all the comments and the only thing they seem to care about is the fact that in the pushing competition, Takeru was able to hold on to his belt the entire time, which to be fair is pretty impressive. But for real, imagine if like Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 3 press conference had no sound. It would be the most awkward thing in the world.
Only a little of a thing, a silly little hillbilly.
Anyway, the tournament for the featherweight title began, and surprise surprise, Takeru flattened everyone, proving his first tournament in K1 wasn't anything close to beginner's luck. Okay, so now Takeru was a double champion, a status that most fighters chase their entire lives in hopes of achieving, but Takeru was not done by any stretch. After a few title defenses at featherweight as to not hold up the division, Takeru went up a weight class yet again and decided to take a stab at the super featherweight belt to become triple champ. If successful, he would be the first person ever to do it in K1. Again, he went through a championship tournament and again he beat everyone. Champ, champ, champ. He has now won 16 out of 16 fights with K1 and is renowned as one of the greatest kickboxers in the world. Takeru was showered in brand deals, accolades, and media coverage wherever he turned. He was even lucky enough to go over to Bang Muay Thai in America so he could get cheap shotted by resident piece of shit TJ Dillashaw during sparring. So sugoi.
I am very sorry, タケル君。
Unfortunately, in the world of combat sports, you're always one bad loss away from everyone dropping you and pretending you were never really that good in the first place. Takeru could not afford the luxury of losing. Including all organizations, he was on a 35-0 winning streak as of his last super featherweight title defense against Leona Pettis. Great fight, by the way. The responsibility seemed to weigh heavy on Takeru. There are parts of a short documentary about him where he laments on his fear of losing. And who wouldn't, really? No matter how big they talk, even most of the GOATs fear their demise. Perhaps not in words, but in actions. John Jones jumped to heavyweight the moment Ngannou left. Sure, he probably could have beat him, but Ngannou's power was probably a risk he was terrified of taking. Then you have people like Tyson Fury, who will promise to fight a reliable contender before going on to book a bout with Bryce Hall. Takeru was one of the few champions of our era that refused to sit back and take the easy route, and because of this, was destined to lose eventually. But that's why all of his fans loved him. Combat sports are interesting in the fact that you have those at the top who wait and those at the top who pursue. No fight is easy, but there's a distinguishable difference between pursuing fighters like Takeru and Alexander Volkanovski and every boxer to exist post-Mayweather.
There's only one person.
It makes those winning streaks so much more special. Being undefeated doesn't matter anymore because you're fighting the best. At this point, Takeru was seen as one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. Key word, one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. In a rival organization, there was another kid, this one being a prodigy, destroying every can the organization of Ryzen threw his way. This young man was called Tenshin, and you may know him as the Japanese kid who fought retired Floyd Mayweather and fucking died. This doesn't have to be said, but if they allowed kicking in that match, Floyd Mayweather would have been sent into an early grave.
I know what he did to the country of Japan.
Tenshin is a technical southpaw mastermind with possibly the best hands in modern day kickboxing. He also has dynamic kicks, sensible head movement, precise counters, stellar timing, and he looks like a frog pug cross build. Tenshin is one of the few people to defeat Rodtang, controversial as the decision may have been. He even knows how to play the point game, throwing flowery rolling thunder kicks when he gets tired so he can spend 3 years getting up, which in turn allows him to stay ahead on points. For years, this fight was teased, as these two figurative Goliaths in the sport seemed to circle the same stratosphere and were on their way to collide eventually. Where Tenshin would slip, control range and counter, Takeru would close distance, force a firefight and brawl till you drop. It was the tale of two fighters attempting to impose their will, seemingly impenetrable styles that could only be cracked by each other. The question was, who was going to crack? But that was a pipe dream. Both fighters were protective of their legacy and they were in two of the largest rivaling kickboxing organizations in Japan. It's a shame really, because I would have really liked to— oh my god. So out of nowhere, the fight is happening, and suddenly there's loads of promotion and talks of it being held in the Tokyo Dome with a maximum capacity of 55,000 people. It looks like the Tokyo Dome is going to be packed as well, and the card is stacked. Anticipation for this event was crazy, and even non-kickboxing fans were getting this thing spilling onto their social media. This was the biggest kickboxing event to ever take place in Japan, and what did they call it? They literally just called it the match. So fast forward to the event. All of the bouts were crazy because these kickboxers were feeling major pressure to perform. The audience was massive. Then it came time for the match. Takeru and Tenshin, unstoppable force, immovable object. One thing I distinctly remember when watching this live during the introduction was, damn, Takeru looks really nervous. And then when I saw Tenshin, I was like, damn, Tenshin looks really locked in. Obviously, body language and facial cues can only give so much, but it felt like Takeru's deer-in-headlights expression, compared to Tenshin believing he's a shonen anime protagonist, was foreboding to what may happen. So round by round, let's go. Round 1. Takeru is having a very hard time connecting his hands on Tenshin. Not only is it an open stance fight, but Tenshin has some murderous straight shots that keep landing on him down the pipe, not to mention the kicks at range. Takeru is struggling heavy, but just as Tenshin starts to tee off on the ropes, Takeru lands a huge right overhand to Tenshin's jaw, which reminds him Takeru isn't someone he can explode on and bully. So he goes back to the distance game, which pays a lot of dividends as Takeru tracks, eating Tenshin's jabs and kicks. And the moment where every Takeru fan's heart broke. He tried to engage in a brawl, but Tenshin slipped to the side and landed one of the cleanest left overhand counters smack bang on his jaw that I've ever seen. Tenshin goes over to his corner to be a fucking anime character or something, while Takeru scrambles to regain his composure, which is heartbreaking to watch. Eventually, he returns to his feet, with a shot that would have put most people out flat. And as soon as they were about to get back into it, the round was over, which was probably for the best in retrospect. Optimum recovery for Takeru, and there was no way of winning that round anyway. Round 2, much of the same. Takeru cannot get into range whatever he does. The straight shots and counters of Tenshin just prevent any offense he tries to enforce. Tenshin has also started annoying time-wasting antics with his rolling thunder kicks and the likes. I would say he milked the head clash too, but honestly we went in there and we don't know how bad that smack hit his eye. However, Takeru was actually beginning to land some shots near the end of the round. Even though Tenshin sensibly clinches up with Takeru, it shows that it's not impossible to hit him, as the crowd rallies. But even then, Tenshin is exiting on angles and countering Takeru way too much to call it his round. Round 3, after a brief buffering period, Takeru is seemingly getting into his zone. He lands a very nice knee followed by a lead hook that garners a large response from the crowd. He's smiling while eating shots, which is a sign to most fighters that face Takeru that he's about to separate you from consciousness. But Tenshin is not most fighters. Although, to be fair, Tenshin is clearly tiring, and despite his continuously slick movements, it's very clear to see the imposing will and pressure of Takeru is starting to even out the fight a lot. Tenshin is continuously clinching longer than necessary when Takeru just wants to break so he can continue pressuring him. Takeru is not winning by any stretch, but the fight has definitely reached a balancing point. But the bell rings, and you can immediately tell Takeru knew he lost. I can't speak on what would have happened and how the tables could have turned, but I have said before and I will say it again. The fact that this fight, the largest kickboxing match to happen in decades, didn't go up to 5 championship rounds is fucking criminal. At the announcement of Tenshin's victory, both fighters embraced and were overcome with emotion. They both shed tears on the battlefield they shared together. It was a good fight, and both fighters deserve the utmost respect for their performance, battling it out for thousands in attendance and millions watching at home. The audience was crying, Takeru was crying, the fucking ring girls were crying, and in the midst of this emotional roller coaster, Takeru still took the time to bow to audience members in attendance as he made his way back to the dressing room. Anyway, Tenshin was like, I'm boxing now, bitches. And Takeru was like, not feeling it to be honest, might retire. This very much felt like a fight that needed to happen so they could move on with their lives. So that was the result of the match. Not the ideal outcome for Takeru fans, to be honest, but it was what it was. I will say this, Japanese fans are way more loyal than most Western fans. I sometimes despise Western fan bases in combat sports. We turn so quickly on actual human beings when they lose a fight or do something we deem cringy. Who actually fucking cares if Israel Adesanya says he's the meme king and proceeds to put the most normie millennial shit I've ever seen in my life? Just move on with your life, man. Preying so heavily on someone's downfall that it actually upsets you just speaks to obscene amounts of insecurity. It's probably because the way of the samurai is ingrained in Japanese culture. They have respect, power, and inappropriate groping on public transport.
Oh my god!
They're like the future of humanity in present day. Takeru was released by K1 following his loss against Tenshin, and that was seemingly the end. But what's that saying? You can't keep a good man down? I guess a good man can keep others down though. So yeah, Takeru retired, then officially became a free agent and flirted a little with one championship. It's a shame they couldn't close that deal because there were so many amazing fights he could have taken part in, but the dastardly Muay Thai Grand Prix took them again. First Artem Vakitov, then Cedric Doumbé, and now Takaru. I'll never forgive you, Muay Thai Grand Prix. But I'm happy to see him back in the saddle and back in the win column. We love you, Takaru.
That was a very...
Okay, now for the nitty-gritty stuff, how Takaru fights. Takaru is the definition of a technical brawler. His skills increased drastically after moving over to Team Crest, a K1 gym that Masato trained at in his prime, and you can definitely see some similarities in style. Takaru's main weapon is his hands. He's never really been one for straight shots due to his smaller stature. Instead, he relies on closing distance and starting a brawl with his looping combinations. Takaru has mastered the art of what I call the cheeky dip. What Takaru loves to do is to get him and his opponent to a point where they're both swinging Hail Marys at each other, even if he has to take a few to get there. Then, all of a sudden, just when the opponent throws a hook with all of his weight into it, Takaru dips under, returning a powerful counter while they're off balance. It's one of the reasons why his infighting is so superior. The counter-opening move has won him numerous inside exchanges. He also mixes up the hands and knees absurdly well, which is quite rare to see for most fighters nowadays, favouring leg kicks and distance. It's not uncommon for him to use knees as setups to close distance, stepping in with a fake knee and sometimes throwing a right hook. The K1 fighting style is a mixture of kickboxing and karate, so it's no surprise that Takaru has those snappy lead kicks to just poke at people from a distance. While running away from his constant pressure, Takaru will do nothing but continue to chip away at his opponent's lead leg.
I can't fucking compete! I just can't fucking compete! Can you get the fuck out of my face?
At this point, they have two choices. Let him win on points by not engaging, or let him win by knockout by engaging. Excluding the dipping in firefights, Takaru will also just naturally slip on the side of his punches thrown, unintentionally bringing his head off the center line. He does this a lot with his right overhand, and he's accidentally slipped a lot of potential night-ending punches by doing so. Now that being said, despite these dips, would I call Takaru a defensive fighter? Most definitely not. He eats a lot of shots, and even though he can make some swing by him for damaging counter shots, he tends to eat half a dozen along the way. I never really noticed until the tension fight, but Takaru seems to struggle a lot with closing distance against southpaws. Orthodox pressure fighters used to close stance fighting can sometimes struggle when an opponent's lead leg is parallel to theirs. It shuts down a lot of opportunities for his powerful right hand, and the overall distance is something Takaru clearly isn't comfortable with. Suddenly, you're much further apart, and suddenly it becomes a game of hand trapping and trying to play a game of outside lead leg in order to land your power hand. Even when Takaru wins open stance fights, you can't help but feel like the entire match was just like weirdly uncomfortable for him. But yeah, there's some other stuff like frames, hand trap, and guard manipulation and shot selection, but I'm gonna just move on.
Way more exciting than I first anticipated.
Yeah.
One of my favourite fights from Takaru has to be the Pechdam fight because he just runs through that guy. The shots he lands at the end of the fight are flush. You can tell even just by looking at the back of Pechdam's head that they're snapping his face back. Takaru vs Victor Saravia also has a lot of nice inside exchanges. It's always nice to see a fighter stand and bang with Takaru, even though it is a bit of a death sentence.
It was really great, sharp.
Takaru's body shot to Shimida's liver back in his Crush days is very satisfying to go back and watch. The slip body shot is such a satisfying classic counter for those with the skill to land it effectively. Also, the Jamie counter hook knockout was very satisfying for someone like me who loves to watch slip and rip counter fighters. So yeah guys, that was it. That was the video. I hope you enjoyed. I probably won't make another kickboxing video in a while, but I'm planning on making more of these videos that are like, almost like bios about people. Just various things like musicians and other sport guys, even like skateboarders, stuff like that. Just detailing their skills and what they do and their backstory and where they come from, just stuff like that. But Takeru is one of the most exciting fighters possibly to ever exist, and it's a damn shame that most Western audiences have no idea who he is, so I really felt like I wanted to make this video. I hope you found a newfound respect for him, and information on him can be quite hard to find because obviously he's Japanese and he's most loved in Japan, and I don't speak Japanese. So if I got anything incorrect or a bit iffy, feel free to correct us in the comments, I won't mind. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching that, and it was really fun to make. And I'll see you for the next one, guys. I hope you stick around. Thank you very much. Bye now.